Hey, what's going on, U.S. History people? This is Mr. Norris.
And Mr. Lawrence.
And we're going to talk to you video number 3 today, Attitudes Towards Business. And we're going to look at different Americans' views on businesses during the late 19th century. So we're going to first start off talking about, please read along, industrialization and the changes associated with it caused American attitudes towards business to alter or change in the late 1800s. We're going to talk about a guy by the name of Horatio Alger. And who was Horatio Alger, Mr. Lawrence?
Well, is he a real guy?
He is a real guy. He is a writer.
That's right. And what does he write about?
He writes about success stories. This idea of rags to riches really comes from Horatio Alger. Or is it Alger? I don't know. Alger?
Well, I've heard it pronounced both. And it's kind of what, I guess, if we call, quote-unquote, that American dream, where you start from nothing and you work really hard and you save and you're industrious, that one day maybe you can also become wealthy and rich.
That is definitely him. So phrases like strive and succeed or rags to riches or the American dream are associated with him. And he also glorified big business by writing stories about poor people who became rich. Looking at your packet, you'll see one of his most famous books ever was From Canal Boy to President, the story of James A. Garfield. And James Garfield was one of the poorest presidents ever growing up, and he literally helped build canals. He worked in canals, and then he went on to become president. That really stuck in the mind of a lot of Americans, that you can be poor, but end up succeeding in life.
So this becomes a major belief at this time period with the growth of industrialization.
Absolutely.
People striving for that very, very high level of wealth.
Hard work will get you wealth, that idea, yes.
All right, so attitudes towards business. If you just follow along, it says the tremendous wealth some entrepreneurs gained during the late 1800s, as well as the cutthroat business methods they used, led some Americans to rethink their ideas on the meaning of business success. Mr. Norris, do you remember what an entrepreneur is?
Yeah, an entrepreneur is a business owner, somebody who invests in a business and owns it in the hopes of making lots of money.
So, ladies and gentlemen, underline that word entrepreneur. Very important that you understand that. We're going to talk about 4 gentlemen in this unit, guys like Henry Ford, J.P. Morgan. Who else?
Carnegie and
Rockefeller,
and we'll also talk about Vanderbilt.
Oh, yeah, so 5
Vanderbilt.
guys.
Yeah, 5.
So some very important entrepreneurs of this time period.
5 guys. Ooh, that's some good food right there.
That's another entrepreneurial business
That
as
is,
well.
yes, definitely.
So these new philosophies try to explain and justify both the accumulation of wealth and the practices used to achieve it. So we're going to see that some Americans, after a while, start to become concerned about how some of these wealthy Americans are gaining their wealth, and also how some of these businesses are practicing their work.
Definitely. So let's go over and understand a very important term that you learned about last year in Global 2. This term, laissez-faire, is really associated with this guy here. His name is
Adam Smith.
Adam Smith. So he wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations, and he advocated or favored the government taking their hands off the economy. So very little government, if any, government intervention in the economy. And he also believed in the free enterprise system, which we really talk about in terms of capitalism or private ownership of business. It's important to understand, if you see free enterprise, you should also think capitalism, you should also think private ownership. These 3 terms are really used interchangeably.
Sometimes you even hear free markets as well.
Free markets, of those 4, very good.
All right, so follow along. It says business leaders believe that government regulation would destroy individual self-reliance, reduce profits, and harm the economy. So some business leaders felt that any government involvement in the economy was a bad thing. It would stifle American growth.
And during the late 1800s, economics restated the importance of laissez-faire policies to economic growth. Government interference with business was minimal, next to nothing, for much of this period, and entrepreneurs expanded their businesses and earned great wealth. So businesses were able to make lots of money due to little government interference during this time.
All right, so if we continue talking about philosophies of this time period, there's one that we have to be aware of, is the idea of social Darwinism. So you've probably heard of a guy by the name of Charles Darwin. Mr. Norris, have you ever heard of him before?
Yes, he went to the Galapagos Islands and really came up with the idea of evolution. Here's a quick side note. I saw a picture of Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. Mm-hmm. He owned Charles Darwin's tortoise turtle or whatever. Really? So this turtle was alive for like 150, 60 years, something like that. Yeah. Just
cool.
Died recently.
So as Mr. Norris said, he talked about the idea, or really developed this idea, or really wrote about it in popular culture, of evolution. And this kind of idea of survival of the fittest was eventually applied to our social surroundings as well. So we come up with this phrase, social Darwinism, and it adapted the ideas of the British scientist Charles Darwin and applied them to human society.
So survival of the fittest, as Mr. Lawrence just mentioned, is the idea that only the strong survive, and it's okay. If you are strong, you can do whatever it takes to survive. And if you are weak, sadly, you will not survive. This is all going to be applied to the business world.
So again, this will lead us to this term, very important for this unit, is monopolies. And Mr. Norris, do you remember what a monopoly is?
Yes, we talked about it yesterday. It is when businesses want to own all aspects of an industry. Mono means one, so there's one business in control.
All right, so if you're the strongest, you have the right to do this. So how is social Darwinism applied to the business of competition? Well, it says big, successful businesses will conquer smaller, weaker businesses. So again, if you have the resources, the workers, everything you need to be successful in your industry, then you have the right to dominate it.
So we'll finish up talking about robber barons or philanthropists. And these are terms that are thrown around about big business owners. So the philosophies described and the growing gulf between the rich and the poor led some Americans to criticize laissez-faire policies. They were upset with the government for taking their hands off and those who profited from them. So instead of viewing wealthy entrepreneurs as Horatio Alger heroes, so instead of looking at Rockefeller and these really rich people as heroes, critics began to condemn them as robber barons, or people that stole from the poor and kept the money, and they were only in it for their own money. So there are two different views. Are these wealthy people heroes, people that we should emulate and look up to, or are they getting rich at the expense of American society and poor workers?
And just to add to that, this idea of a philanthropist is someone who actually uses their immense wealth to kind of give back to society, whether it's to help build theaters, libraries, donate to schools, hospitals. This is what many of these very wealthy Americans will do. But again, some are very critical because they made so much money off some sometimes shady business practices.
Definitely. We'll get into some of those practices. So please turn to your video response section of your packet, and in at least 3 sentences, we want you to answer, are Rockefeller and other industrialists robber barons or philanthropists, and explain why. Now, I know we haven't gotten into details about Rockefeller yet, so you can really pick any business owner you want. Somebody today like a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs when he was alive from Apple. Are these business owners, are they robber barons? Are they getting rich at the expense of others? Or are they philanthropists? Or are they giving their money back and making society better? Please answer in at least 3 sentences, and we will see you right back here for video number 4 tomorrow. Have a good day.